O'Sullivan's Law strikes again. I'm Brian Lilley with TheRebel.media. There's an old line drawn up by John O'Sullivan, man who's worked with National Review, used to edit National Post. He's worked around the world, once advised Margaret Thatcher. And his law is, O'Sullivan's first law is that any organization that is not explicitly right-wing over time becomes left-wing. Now, why do I bring this up standing in front of Parliament, where people from all political parties, all political stripes are represented? Well, it's because I've got the latest report from the Parliamentary Budget Office in my hand, and it's called How Much Does the Federal Government Spend on Childcare and Who Benefits? This report is biased, to say the least. It looks at the total amount spent on things like the universal childcare benefit and then claims that Canada, at least at the federal government level, is spending 120% of what Canadians spend on childcare. Now, how do they arrive at that? Because they only look through the lens of the universal child care benefit. That's the $100 per month for kids under 6. They only look at that through the lens of institutionalized childcare. Even though the Conservatives brought in this universal child care benefit in 2006 in order to give parents choice to look after kids how they wanted. Now, at the release of this report, I put it to the office that they were biased and they rejected that idea.
Well, I don't know what other benchmark you can use. In fact, as I said, the intention of the policy is for childcare expenses. But the way that it has been distributed is not the direct subsidy for childcare. It is giving money to families however they want to use it for childcare. So that's the only benchmark we have. I don't know whether it's unfair or fair. That's not an issue. It's just what it is.
And yet they admit that the only thing they look at is how much Canadians spend on institutionalized childcare, putting your kid in a daycare center. Parents that want to stay at home, well, that's not really counted because that might be difficult. That might be work. This report, like so many from the Parliamentary Budget Office, reads like it was written to give the opposition and the media, again, so hard to tell them apart, fodder to beat the government up with. And that's immediately what happened with CTV and CBC.
How much is the federal government spending on childcare?
A lot. They were basically going to double it to almost $8 billion in the last 3 or 4 years. So it's a sizable chunk of cash going to parents who need it and parents who don't.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer found that 51% of the families who are receiving and will receive these benefits from federal child care initiatives do not incur child care expenses.
Now, over at Canadian Press, they came to the startling conclusion that as the government expands this program to include children that are over the age of 6, that parents with older children will benefit. Yeah, that's the intent. That's what happens when you expand the program. Once again, this is a government program that looks to, this is a government report that looks at a program and comes to the conclusion that what we need is more of the Quebec-style system. That's the underlying tone in this. Now, I shouldn't be surprised because the Parliamentary Budget Office from the beginning has been an opportunity for the opposition on the left to beat the government with a stick. I was there when Prime Minister Stephen Harper, then just Conservative opposition leader Stephen Harper, proposed the idea of a Parliamentary Budget Office. It was supposed to be non-partisan, but from the beginning, Kevin Page, the first budget officer, he made it out so that he was nothing but a tool for the opposition. He put out reports that were read as if they were written by the opposition. He answered questions that no non-partisan bureaucrat should ever have answered. And so he became a tool for the Liberals and the NDP. Unfortunately, under Jean-Denis Franchet, it's much the same. And that's what this report is really all about. It's funny that this comes out on the same day that Page, the man that started the office, is just down the street from Parliament Hill, speaking to a group that includes CUPE and the Canadian Health Coalition. These are far-left groups putting forward far-left ideas, and he is out there speaking on their behalf. You know, one other thing that happened in that same week that Stephen Harper announced a Parliamentary Budget Office as a campaign idea, he also said this about his ability to move his agenda through Parliament if he became elected as Prime Minister. Speaking in Lévis, Quebec, Harper said, "The reality is that we will have, for some time to come, a Liberal Senate, a Liberal civil service. At least senior levels have been appointed by the Liberals, and courts that have been appointed by the Liberals. So these are obviously checks on the power of a Conservative government." Well, almost a decade into power, of course, the Conservatives have appointed the majority of senators, or at least they have the ability to do so. There's a number of vacancies. They've appointed the majority of the Supreme Court. And yet, even with their appointments like the Parliamentary Budget Officer, it's still a Liberal ethos that runs through the place. Maybe it's just that's the way government is built. That's the way people that go into public service are built. But make no mistake about it, as you read about this report, as you hear it, this has a clear bias in favor of government-run daycare and against parents that decide they'd rather keep their kids at home. The simple fact of the matter is that whether you want to put your kids in daycare or keep your kids at home with you, the Harper Conservatives have given parents that choice, and they're spending more than the other parties would on their universal daycare programs. And yet the opposition parties still say it's not enough. Just remember that as you look to the election in the fall, as you read the reports on this, it's more Liberal bafflegab aimed at taking more control over you, your life, and your kids.